My wildest prediction is that by 2035, the passport as we know will be obsolete. There's one policy change that would make the world twice as rich as it is, and it would be open borders. I truly believe that, but I don't think the world is ready for that. By 2030, the shortage of skills will cost governments and businesses $8.5 trillion. And so what if we think hiring is hard today, it will be even harder in 5 years. It will be even harder in 10 years, which means that there's a necessity of different skill set.
Karoli Hindriks has always been ahead of the curve. At 16, she became one of Estonia's youngest entrepreneurs, later launching 7 TV channels in Northern Europe, including National Geographic and MTV. In 2014, she founded Jobbatical to simplify global relocation and immigration for businesses and employees. And in 2020, the European Council named her one of Europe's 8 most inspiring women. Today, Karoli Hindriks joins us here on My Wildest Prediction to share her bravest thoughts on the future. Welcome to the show, Karoli.
Happy to be here, Tom.
So let's get stuck into this. I'm thrilled with this one. What is your wildest prediction for the future?
My wildest prediction is that by 2035, the passport as we know will be obsolete.
What do you mean by the passport?
The passport. You know, the tiny pamphlet that you have to use every time you exit the airplane or before you go into the airplane. So let me just explain a little bit. Very often we have those things that just are and you don't really question them. And the passport system that we have today is actually originally from the time of World War One. So World War One, imagine, the passport system was created. First of all, it was created by the Western-centric organization in order to defend kind of their own borders, right? So it was created at the end of World War One, and around the same time as Henry Ford and Model T. So if you would have looked out from your window back then, you would have seen Model Ts roaming around. Now, Tom, when you look outside the window, do you see any Model Ts roaming around?
Not unless I'm in a museum.
Exactly. So you probably see Tesla roaming around, but. So we have moved ahead enormously if we look at, for example, the car industry, automobile industry. But the passport as it was then is basically what we have today. And it's just not working. It's not working on several levels. And one being just outdated in terms of technology. It's literally the same kind of pamphlet people were carrying a century ago. But there's also another layer to it. And it is the concept of how and why it actually works or doesn't work, to be very frank. So as I said, passport was created by a Western-centric organization. So back then, Western countries were where you had the highly educated people. So you had those smart people in Western countries, and then they created this organization that let's not let in those people who are less educated. The world has changed here, and where we are today is so few different things. First of all, we are in the biggest talent shortage in human history. So all countries are trying to figure out how to get in skilled people. At the same time, the most highly educated immigrants or migrants are actually from the countries with worst passports, meaning like least travel-friendly passports. So if you look at today where the most highly educated migrants come from, these countries are India, China, and Philippines.
You're not saying that my piece of dead tree with stamps made of ink, you're not saying that is outdated and instead I should have like a plastic card. You're saying that I should have the right to get on a plane and go to Japan and like that's just what it is to be a human, and I should go to like North Korea and like, you know, I can get a job there working in the local Communist Party headquarters or something. You're saying like complete free movement of people rather than passport.
What I'm saying here is the 2 layers that are broken. One is the tech aspect. So in a way, I think that today's passport that we still use, and I mean, I travel every week and, you know, standing in this passport control, it's like you're standing with your old National Geographic magazine, right? So it's just the aspect of the lack of technology that doesn't work. But the other is just the whole idea of how and why the passport system is created the way it is, and why.
Yeah.
And today it is just not working. So basically,
and are we talking about travel as well as work, or are we just talking about tourism?
Everything. So we talk about everything. So in that sense, and in that sense, I think the driving force for the change is actually work, and it's connected to what I mentioned before, that we are in the biggest talent shortage in human history. So on one hand, countries still base all the movement on this outdated system where you say India, bad passport, America, good passport, and you just label people based on where they were accidentally born, which just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the people, but I think the good news is it doesn't make sense for the countries anymore, because and that's what we are seeing as my team and business, what we are navigating in between the private sector and the policy of immigration. What we see is that there's a shift starting to happen. And the shift is that countries are trying to identify groups of people, not based on where they were accidentally born, but for example, what skill sets they have. So, and why this is happening is because the base system of the passport that was created a century ago is just not working. And that's my prediction, is that right now the shift is starting to happen, or has started to happen, but by 2035, passport as we know it will not work. It will be next to your, somewhere in the box next to your old National Geographic magazine.
It's definitely quite easy to go through some of the dynamics in the world right now and how this solves them. You know, you can definitely look at aging populations. You can definitely look at sort of workforce participation rates. So you can kind of create an environment where this seems like a good solution. But how would it work sort of in practicality? I mean, does every country have to sign up for this? You know, the sort of UN is going to force people to let anyone in. There's sort of different tiers where, you know, maybe South Americans can all go around South America, a bit like they can now. You know, how's it going to happen?
Definitely, there needs to be a new agreement, but maybe we can look at some of the things that already have been working in a smaller scale that can be actually replicated into something bigger and global. So let's look. So I originally come from Estonia, which is the most digital country in the world. In Estonia, there's a platform which is like the backbone of the whole digital identity. Every human in Estonia, every person gets a digital identity, and that identity talks to each whatever public or private system. So doing anything from like, let's say, doing your taxes or participating in elections is as simple as going to your Instagram, literally. And it works because there's a central digital identity that connects to any database, right? So this is now one country. On the other level, I think one of the things and examples that we saw from the European side was actually a pretty... it came from a necessity to find solution fast. It was when the pandemic started. So remember, when you traveled to around EU, you needed to have a COVID pass. You needed to have a QR code that basically, again, one system, one way to identify that are you eligible to enter or are you not eligible to enter. And now actually another good example is that Finland actually started in 2023, so last year, a pilot project of making a smartphone-based passport. So basically eliminating the actual physical passport and making this fully smartphone based. And they are now experimenting with different countries. And yes, in order to get there, we need to have new agreements, but those agreements are starting to happen. And they are starting to happen because actually, if you think of the same passport, the pamphlet that we use today, it is not very secure. It's just not very secure. And the whole purpose of a passport, one of the purposes was security, basically to identify whom we let in and who we don't let in. And it is not secure and it's not also efficient.
So what's this sort of ideal future that you're looking towards, in full?
what my team wakes up doing every morning and what we are aspiring towards is basically a world where every human can unleash their full potential anywhere without basically any, not dependent on where they were born. What we aspire to do through our technology is literally taking down the discriminative barriers of people being let to move or not move based on where they were accidentally born. What we are doing, and then how this kind of so what we are doing is that we are using AI and automation to make the whole immigration process for employers and their employees seamless and much lower cost. So what it means is that when let's say Tom moves to, where do you want to move, Tom? Do you want to move to France?
I want to go to Brazil.
Brazil. Okay, so Tom moves to Brazil. So if we would onboard you to our platform, we would collect over 500 data points on our platform from your different documents. It's all on our platform, and with click of a button, all the forms are filled. We have all the information we need to move you to any country in the world. So you have to do it once, and after Brazil, maybe Tom, you will decide to go to Japan. You don't have to do anything anymore besides have the desire to move. We have all the information. Moving from this pamphlet, which was just based on where you were born, versus we know everything about Tom, and now the countries, let's say Germany and Japan, they want to get you in because Tom has skill set that they have shortage of. So now we can identify that, okay, Tom will get a fast track to Japan because of your skill set, not because you were accidentally born somewhere, but because of your skill set. So what we're seeing is that we are able to start moving the new identity of international movement into something that is much more individual versus something that is just you were born there. That's the bucket you belong to. So kind of taking this discrimination out of this concept of passport that it has been there for over the past century. Does that now clarify a little bit more?
How does the company work at the moment? I mean, which countries does it operate between, for example?
So we can relocate people to over 40 different countries already.
Okay. Is Brazil one of those?
Brazil is one of them. So basically our customers today are businesses, which means that if your employer is our customer and you desire to move to Brazil, so you are onboarded on the platform, and within seconds you can, we have like AI enabled assessments, which will tell you what type of visas are possible for you, what's the route, what's the timeline. So basically we are using, so you don't even have to talk to a person, the system will tell you a lot of information that you were asking. So basically that's how we work.
And then I presume there's this sort of terrible handover where we go from a sort of AI clever digital system to something where you probably have to print things out and do, have vaccines and get paper certificates of your degree and all sorts of old-fashioned things like that.
In some countries, we have managed to actually create like the link already with the system. In some countries, we still have to, like the last mile will be, you will get everything needed. And then there's the last mile that the government still doesn't work on the digital. Basically, it's not digital enough for us to push the information into the system. But in some countries, it already is. Basically, we can push the information from our system to that. Yeah. So it's already happening. But all in all, I think what my kind of connecting to the prediction is that I think what we're seeing, there will be a shift happening. First of all, that we are moving away from the aspect of discrimination in the passport system. And I think that's super exciting. Definitely, and that's part of the work that we're doing, trying to do that, trying to influence that. And the second part is just making upgraded version of cross-border movement, which doesn't include anymore this physical passport. And it will be much more connected to either, face recognition, iris scan, or which will be much more efficient and actually much more secure.
Is this a sort of system that you think can work for everyone? Because the immigration conversation is quite interesting at the moment. And it's also very contentious, but we've almost got like a kind of barbell system, where if you come from a very desperate situation or if you're extremely determined, you go through processes which are either sort of cunning or sneaky, or they're illegal. And then if you're a sort of globally in demand talent that can point to, fame or a Nobel Prize, or, a Cambridge degree, then you can probably get in on the basis of kind of, outrageous world-class skills. But anyone sort of normal, anyone that's sort of not fleeing war or persecution and is a good car salesperson, or anyone that sort of works in a hospital, but they aren't necessarily like an in-demand type of medical skill. Like it feels like if you're sort of normal, you're facing much harder circumstances in a way. So is this designed for everyone?
And I would say actually the absolute opposite okay. Here. And I think the large part why it is like that is that the system is inefficient. It's inefficient, and which makes the process slow. It still involves so much of human who has its own biases. So removing those barriers from the system can actually help more people. So a few things. First of all, what we are seeing right now as employers around the world, hiring has never been as hard, and it will go. So by 2030, the shortage of skills will cost governments and businesses $8.5 trillion. And so what if we think hiring is hard today, it will be even harder in 5 years. It will be even harder in 10 years, which means that there's a necessity of different skill set. And it's not only the Nobel Prize. It's much more, if you look at where the shortages are in different countries. In UK, for example, huge shortage of medical workers, construction workers. So, but the thing is that since the system is so outdated, it makes the whole process slow. So employers are suffering, and the potential employees who could be then working for those employers are suffering. And that's, I think, the shift. What we're starting to see is countries are trying to figure this out. So if I would, it would be on me, I would take down the borders completely. And this economist, I think it was 2017, said that there's one policy change that would make the world twice as rich as it is, and it would be open borders. I truly believe that, but I don't think the world is ready for that. But I do believe that there's a shift happening towards bucketing people differently based on the skill sets, and that doesn't mean only the high end of people. It actually means widening the opportunity for a much bigger crowd than it has been. That kind of cross-border movement has been available before. And just for you to know, Tom, never in human history have people moved as much as they do today. Even just in between 70s and 90s, cross-border movement, like work travel, was mainly from US corporations to the other countries. And now it's completely diversified. So never before have the humans moved as much as they do today. And this shift is continuing to happen. And we definitely do see there's a political reaction to it, because if you have a change, there's always some people who don't like the change, but it doesn't still stop the change, because there's a necessity to change because of the shortage of skills across the world.
It's always interesting to me, because so much of the kind of foundations of the world seem to be based on sort of pre-digital criteria. Quite often I might do something like a speaking engagement in Sydney for a presentation I kind of wrote in Romania, but I also did a bit in the airport in Dubai, and I'm sort of British, but I live in Miami. And you think, in theory, I should be paying income tax on where that value was delivered. And I don't know whether that value was delivered from, a British university that I went to 20 years ago, or whether I should pay it in Miami because that's where I live, or whether I should pay it in Dubai because that's where I came up with the big insight. And you realize that many of these sort of containers just don't really work. But at the same time, to sort of move fully to like a post-digital age where all this stuff is in the background, you then have to start thinking about, what are nations and what are governments and what does this infrastructure mean, and like what is identity, and also you have to be sort of aware of your own privilege as well, because I think it's quite easy for sort of middle-class English people to love immigration because you get a great new Polish deli and you can have a kind of wonderful, Portuguese cleaner, and you can get great building work done from Polish people that work harder. And it's easy to be ignorant to the fact that there are people that have lived in that country that have had to learn the knowledge to become a taxi driver that are now being threatened. At the moment, what system in the world do you think is the most efficient and the sort of least bureaucratic and the most dynamic when it comes to immigration?
So which countries are, I think, the forefront? I mean, definitely I'm biased, but I just having Estonia definitely is a great example because just everything worked there. Like I moved to London and I suddenly understood how well everything works in Tallinn and Estonia. But I think definitely in terms of kind of modernizing the system, I think Finland is a great example. They do a lot of experiments around that. I already mentioned the digital passport, the way they have really moved away from paper to digital. It has been really impressive. But even, I mean, if I look at other countries, even Germany has made a lot of steps. And I mean, there are different. So there are different layers of it, and maybe another topic. But there's so Germany has done a lot to actually simplify the process, taking down barriers like cost. How expensive it is to get a visa, what's the threshold for salary. So really helping to get more immigrants in because the skill shortage is so high. But I think like in many ways, those countries like Finland, like Estonia, are the ones who will kind of others are following. So if somebody does it successfully, then others will follow. And actually, I don't know if Tom, you have heard about digital nomad visa. There's a world visa type.
Yeah.
Actually, this was a visa that we created. So I pitched it in 2016 to Estonian president. And my prediction was that if one country like Estonia will do it successfully, other countries will follow. And actually now over 60 countries have that visa, and many of them we actually have advised. And why we did that was because, like right now we're talking about passport, was that we saw that, just like you were talking about taxes, that there was like in a way hole in a policy that you have you can work for employment when you are hired by a country, this country-based company, or you can marry someone, or you can move as a tourist, but you can't be anything in between. And the in-between was where the actual workplace was moving. Millions of people were working as digital nomads, but there was no policy to support it. So now over 60 countries have implemented it. But it started from the first country. So Estonia did it, and then other countries followed. The same we will be seeing with the digitalizing of the passport, or just changing the concept of the passport. And I would predict that Finland will be one of the kind of pioneers in that.
So when you look to different countries at the moment, it strikes me, I've got moderate experience in this, that the most are pretty bureaucratic, and most are quite slow, and most are expensive, and most involve lots of hoops. Do you think that's by design, or is it an ignorance to what technology can do to improve things?
That's a really good question, because I have been in many debates with politicians regarding that. And so I think there's one thing, and I have actually said it out on different stages, that I want to see what country will be the first country to have the Ministry of User Experience. Mm-hmm. Because I think if you kind of think about the tech world, for example, you go to Amazon or you go to Airbnb, you assume things work, because they very much think of what's the design. So somebody comes in, wants to make a purchase, what happens then? What's the user experience? And I think what we're starting to slowly see, like I said, even countries like Germany, there are baby steps of trying to figure out the user experience of somebody coming in. So I think in that sense, it is ignorance. And I think also the necessity was not there, because as it is only very recent, like past decade, when the global mobility or the movement across borders has really taken off. And today, the companies who were even not maybe would not have been even thinking about hiring anybody from abroad have to start thinking about it, which means the countries have to start thinking about it. So I think it is ignorance and just that the governments have not been fast enough to react to the needs of the actual market. But it's starting to happen. We're seeing that.
And what's your sort of ideal future vision? So we've only got a few minutes left. Paint to me the sort of 2040 vision. What does it look like to walk down the streets of Tallinn, or Lisbon, or rural South Sudan?
So I think the simplified version of the vision is, and this is what kind of is our mission statement as well. We want to make moving to a new country as easy as booking a flight. So now when you go to home and book a flight, you cannot remember how 15 years ago it was a headache. You went to the agency, you filled paperwork, you waited for somebody to call. If you look at 2035, 2040, I think the mobility that we see, there will be an significant enhancement of mobility, and which means that we can embrace and move around in those different cultures. I think we have a lot more diversity and a lot more open-mindedness about diversity. So I think, in a way, movement will positively explode, and that will also enrich the way we see life, the way we see humanity, and in some ways, I learned some years ago that in UN, when you work in certain positions in UN, you have a passport which says that you are human. Yeah. There's no country, right? So, and I think this will be something like this will be the future, where our borders will be in that way eliminated, and we have kind of changed the way. It doesn't mean that there will not be ways to make countries secure. I don't mean that, but I mean that we use the best technology to keep people secure, at the same time eliminate the friction of cross-border movement, so that we can actually enjoy the world that we have.
I think it's a great thing to talk about. I think one of the weird things about the world right now is there's some really, really contentious and big things that are not easy. We do have countries where the population is dying. We do have healthcare systems that everyone pays for. They're determined to keep everyone for as alive as they possibly can be, to the detriment of young people. We have massive sort of immigration tensions across the whole world. And these things are really complicated, and they're really difficult, and they're really nuanced, and they involve trade-offs. And we're not really very good at talking about these things. We're not very good at talking about bold solutions that involve a sense of change in our mindset towards things. So Karol, thank you very much for coming onto the show and daring to talk about some of these things.
Thank you, Tom.